And is that book over here? Throw me that book. We got to show that book here.
What do you need?
See that book right there?
Come and knock on our door?
Yes, Come and Knock on Our Door by Chris Mann. It's all here. And I got to say, this is the best book ever written about Three's Company. But then again, it's the only book, so that's why I'm pushing
That'd be a clip for mature audiences.
Yes, right.
Oh.
You're listening to Rico and The Man with Rob Traegler and Peter Martino.
Knock on our door. Come and knock on our door. We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you. Where the kisses are hers and his. Three's Company too.
Welcome back to Rico and the Man. What's up, Pete?
Hey, howdy, hey. Very excited for today's show.
Yes, very exciting special we have here for Rico and the Man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Rob, usually when a major celebrity passes away, we like to pay tribute to them here on Rico and the Man. We talk about their career, share our favorite memories of them. But we didn't get to do that when we sadly lost Suzanne Somers back in October to breast cancer at the age of 76.
Yeah.
The reason we didn't give Suzanne a proper tribute is because we were anxiously awaiting to have our next guest on, as he's an expert on all things Three's Company and has actually met Suzanne Somers a couple of times.
Cool.
He is author of what many consider to be the definitive guide to Three's Company, called Come and Knock on Our Door, a hers and his guide to Three's Company, a book that I love, and it happened to be one of my first online purchases, believe it or not. We are delighted to have him on the show. Please welcome Chris Mann.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Rob. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words about the book, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here.
We're very excited to be talking about Suzanne Somers, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first,
Yes.
We want to get a little history about you and Three's Company. Do you remember when you first became a fan of the show?
You know, I do. It's funny. My family jokes that I remember, leaving the womb. I have a very, good memory of early childhood. By the time I was 5, I was certainly watching a lot of TV. I loved all those ABC shows. I mean, everything from Wonder Woman and the $6 Million Man, to all those ABC comedies, like especially the Tuesday night lineup, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. And I know Three's Company initially premiered on a Thursday, funny enough, right before the premiere of 8 is Enough, which was another favorite show of mine. And I do recall seeing the first episode. And then they moved it to Tuesdays several weeks later, and it just caught on fire, right? It was this huge thing. And but I remember at age 5 watching this show, and I have distinct memories of John Ritter, his pratfalls and his different techniques that he used in those early episodes. And so when it became a huge hit a year or two later, I have more distinct memories of watching it, by year 2 or 3. But it was definitely from the get-go.
When we started watching it, it was already in syndication. We never saw it really in its first run.
Yeah, I became obsessed with it during Nick at Night.
Yeah,
that's
oh wow.
Now, yes, Nick at Night was where I really became obsessed with Three's Company. I mean, it was on every night, and I would fall asleep to those pratfalls.
It's like a lullaby.
Yes.
It does have this multi-generational appeal. I think that the physical comedy is the thing, like with Lucy, that is timeless. And so, if you have a broad sense of humor, and you can enjoy everything from, Seinfeld and some of the more urbane, comedies, right on through Three's Company. If you enjoy that broad farce too, then it's there for you, and it's timeless.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Lucy, and she was a big fan of the show. She loved John Ritter, and she actually came to do the what was it, the 100th episode, or
the best of Three's Company.
And her and John Ritter were good friends in real life.
Absolutely, and it validated the show for one of the first times. In the media, people had to acknowledge Lucy loves Three's Company,
right?
And by then, it was really clear that this was at the end of the sixth season, that Three's Company had survived the exit of Suzanne, and it had really become a showcase, especially in the sixth season and beyond, for John Ritter's talents. And that was the through line of the whole series, and the way Joyce DeWitt was a great straight man for him. A lot of people felt that the original cast, the show was never the same, and there were a lot of people who really loved the last 3 years of the show, with Priscilla Barnes and Don Knotts and Richard Klein versus Chrissy and the Ropers as the five. It's interesting where people come into it, what they saw first or what they connected with first. It varies depending upon if people were watching it back in the day or if they caught it in syndication. So there's kind of two schools there.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely agree with that. I mean, what I remember about the show is, like you, I was just enthralled with John Ritter and his physical comedy. You know, I was too young to pick up on any of the sexual innuendos or, you know, the fact that he was supposed to be gay. Like, I didn't get that whole concept to me. It was just mostly about the physical comedy and just watching this pretty much live action cartoon come to life.
And that is perfectly stated, a live action cartoon. When I first interviewed John, I said, you know, gosh, you kind of reminded me of, you know, the Roadrunner. And he said in his, you know, most famous Three's Company episode, Up in the Air, from the sixth season, where he mixed tranquilizers with that drink, the Rocket, when he went to the party with Janet. He said when he fell off the bar and came up with the plant on his head, he wanted to look like Bugs Bunny doing Carmen Miranda. And so he had that live action cartoon, you know, vision in his head too. And I think that's what gave that show such youth appeal, particularly with John, is he was mindful of that frivolity and that fun kind of Looney Tunes escapism of that show.
And then you decided to eventually write this book because you were such a big fan of the show.
Right.
Talk about a little bit about your experience writing this book. Did you get to personally interview a lot of the cast and crew yourself?
I did. Fortunately, I got to interview all of the cast except for Priscilla Barnes, though I met her a couple of times, and she just wasn't ready to talk about Three's Company. She would eventually be on the E! True Hollywood Story that I had actually pitched to E! when my book was published. And I said, you know, I've got the story here. I can interview. The cast is finally talking. And so Priscilla was at that point comfortable talking, and she showed up to support the book at a book signing. But everyone else I interviewed in person, except for Suzanne. I interviewed her over the phone. She was coming back from some gig that she was doing. This was right during the last season of Step by Step. But I'd met Suzanne a couple of times in the late 80s, early 90s, and I'll share that story here with you in a minute. But when I was in college, I interviewed Suzanne a couple of times, and then I thought, you know what? I was getting ready to be editor of the University of Tulsa student newspaper, The Collegian, and I was really into, you know, publications, and I wanted to write a book, and I thought, well, why don't I do sort of a precursor with a sort of a fanzine or a newsletter about Three's Company? And so I did this thing called the Roomie Report, and I included part of my interview with Suzanne in it, and I sent it out to everyone, and I heard back from one person, John Ritter, and here I am, 19 years old, and I get this letter from his assistant saying, John wants to talk to you. And I await his call, and he was just the greatest guy. And he said, you know, gosh, Ron Howard was just 19 when he directed his first movie, because I was 19 at the time. And so, you know, that's how nice he was. He was trying to compare me to Ron Howard. And I'm like, well, hey, you know, you appreciate what I'm trying to do here. And he said, I'm really touched and flattered. He gave me an interview. He told me he would interview for a book. So that lit my fire. And so when I graduated a few years later and moved out to California in 95, he opened doors to other people pretty fast. It was Joyce and Suzanne who I interviewed near the end, and Suzanne in the 11th hour, but everyone else was in person. And so I did get to meet all of them. And that was quite a joy.
Wow, that's incredible. That the star of the show was the first one to respond to you like that.
Yeah.
To
Seriously.
this teenager.
That's awesome.
It changed the trajectory of my life, and I will forever be grateful to him.
Were any of them a little bit more closed off to talk to in order to write this book?
Yes, the crazy thing about Three's Company, and I pretty much knew this when I was in high school and in college, because I would look after every bit of information, every interview that Suzanne might do, or John or Joyce, who disappeared from Hollywood. And I knew Joyce in particular was very private. She left the industry. She left Hollywood because of the way things went down at the end on Three's Company. There were other people like Norman Fell, even Ann Wedgeworth, certainly Suzanne, who had bad exits from the show. They got kind of raw deals in some cases. So there were people that had to sort of be coaxed. And I think because I was a fan, certainly I had a journalism degree and background, but I wasn't coming at it like, an investigative reporter, so to speak. So they opened up to me, and I was able to get this incredible story that I knew was there. It had been untapped. From all three of the originals, especially. And that was really exciting. But yeah, Joyce and Suzanne always knew the value of her story. Suzanne was an incredible businesswoman. She appreciated me. She was really kind to me when I was a teenager. I interviewed her for the Collegian again. And I had met her in 1989, I think it was the summer of 89, at the Pat Sajak show. I read that she was going to be on the Pat Sajak show that day. So a friend of mine and I went over to CBS, where they filmed Three's Company, same studio. And Suzanne appeared. And right before she went into the artist entrance, I managed to give her an article that had appeared in the Tulsa World, I think, newspaper a year prior, about me and my Three's Company memorabilia, my collection, and my love for the show. And she took it and went in. And after the show, she left early because she had to fly to Vegas or something. And I looked at my friend and I said, maybe we should go, see if we can leave her leaving, the artist entrance again. So we walked out of the studio early, past all the Price is Right props, and just walked out and sat on the sidewalk, the same entrance where the stars of Three's Company used to come and go, 10 years prior. And Suzanne and her husband, Alan Hamill, walked out, and Suzanne looked at me and she wriggled her finger come here. So I'm 17, right? And I'm like, oh my God, the star, she's the sheriff. And I talked to her for a couple of minutes, and my God, if you've ever had that first star sighting with one of your idols, just like the heavens part, right? And she was so kind, and I didn't want to take up her time. I got an autograph, and I probably said some, goofy things. And a year later, she was visiting Tulsa to promote her book, Keeping Secrets, about her childhood, growing up with an alcoholic father. And she was lecturing with that story. And ultimately, a year later, that story would become an ABC TV movie during her big comeback with Step by Step and The Thigh Master. This was about a year prior, in 1990. So my name was on a list of media reporters in Tulsa that would be talking to her in exclusive interviews. So I get this call, and I pick up the phone. I say, hello. And she said, is this the Chris Mann? Well, of course, I died again, right? And so she remembered me, and she was so cool and so nice. She's like, well, come backstage. This was a special group of people that, despite the business side of things, despite the emotional, falling outs that they had, and how nasty it could get because it was Hollywood and because it was business, were all very appreciative of the love for them and the show. And so I had a wonderful time meeting with her. And so she eventually came into the book, and Joyce came in the book eventually too, and was very reticent but over time, you meet with people 2 or 3 times and they start to open up. And I knew between John and Joyce and Suzanne that I was getting to write this book that I envisioned as a kid, and it was incredible.
Certain actors or actresses feel typecast by, like Tina Louise, I feel was resented Gilligan's Island for years.
Yes.
But by the sounds of it, it sounds like the whole cast of Three's Company really, appreciated the show and appreciated the fact that they were associated with the show instead of vice versa.
Perhaps the one exception might have been Priscilla Barnes at a certain point, because she had a varied career in film and television. And then she got stuck on a show that she was unhappy with because of the producers. And then she kind of got typecast and had a hard time resuming her film career until she became a Bond girl for, in a kind of a Bond girl in one of the James Bond films.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always said it's better to be remembered for something positive and good versus something awful. So they might as well embrace it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And thank God they all did, because, you're kind of like, oh my God, and am I going to meet one of them and they're going to be just like, what are you doing this for? This show ruined my life.
Yeah.
A Three's Company would only come around really once in a lifetime. They all had other successes, but nothing quite as special as that. So I think I hit it at the right time.
What was the general reaction from the cast and crew when the book was published? Were most of them pretty receptive of it, or did you have any pushback on it?
I didn't get any pushback, really, except Suzanne. Her assistant wrote me a nice thank you letter for the inscribed book I sent her. They were all really receptive. John Ritter, who was busy doing many, many things, finishing up Sling Blade, other projects, he still took the time and took the book onto multiple shows and held the book up and said, buy this book. And I could never have imagined that would have happened.
We actually have an audio soundbite of John Ritter endorsing the book on the early show when he was on with Joyce DeWitt.
Yeah, it was great. It was God.
And is that book over here? Throw me that book. We got to show that book here.
What do you need?
See that book right there?
Come and knock on our door?
Yes, Come and Knock on Our Door by Chris Mann. It's all here. And I got to say, this is the best book ever written about Three's Company. But then again, it's the only book, so that's why I'm pushing it.
That'd be a clip for mature audiences.
Yes, right.
Only.
That just made my year.
It was hilarious because he's like, it's the only, it's the only book about Three's Company. Yes,
the best book and the only book.
I was thinking, like, back when we watched the show in syndication. Yeah, we weren't really kind of reading between the lines, people, thinking he's gay and the progressive themes for its time.
Yeah.
Do you know of any pushback, like as far as like the network executives on those storylines?
Yes, there was. There was a censor, an ABC censor, who was there for every episode and would come back with the script. You couldn't say you left the toilet seat up, but you could say you put the toilet seat down. It was really kind of nutty stuff like that. I think one of Suzanne's last episodes, there was an issue with a line, probably in the episode, called $100 a Watt, about Chrissy's friend visiting, and they find out that she's a call girl, and they didn't want the price attached to her or something like that. And Ted Bergman, one of the executives in charge of production, said that the ABC executives, look, last week on Soap, there was a line about having sex going all around the world for sex or something. It's like, that's sex all over your body. And you're upset about this. But because the show was such a hit, and because it had a youth following, and when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I wasn't getting that stuff. Probably not even when I was 11 or 12. And it didn't even really matter to me, because I knew the show was coming from a good place. I didn't think that there was anything homophobic or anything anti-women, or I just didn't get that. It was a farce. And I knew that as a kid. And so I think that eventually ABC said, look, they know what they're doing. And the show started to sort of become more of a physical comedy versus a a bedroom farce about midway through. So I think they eventually backed off.
Yeah, I mean, comparable to what you see today on TV. Three's Company is very tame.
It's so tame. It's so tame. And look, there's these Roper romps, Mrs. Ropers in death. Audra's become this icon that I think she always knew that character would be her immortality. And men and women both alike are dressing up as Mrs. Roper.
What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I think that, first of all, it shows that people really need that escapism now, just as we did back in the day, perhaps even more now, right?
Sure.
Because everything is so heightened and polarizing. And Mrs. Roper was this character that was so carefree and loving and accepting. And she had these unmet desires, but she wore these caftans and muumuus and just was ready for a party. She was ready to let it all hang out. And even if her husband wasn't ready for that, he wasn't quite ready to put up another shelf,
right.
As they say to do. But people connect with the liberal aspect of that show, and I think the loving aspect of that show. So when at times I hear people go, "Oh, that show was problematic," or "It was cringeworthy," well, yeah, because it was a product of its times in terms of some of the sex jokes and that content. But if you look back at a lot of famous farces from previous centuries, we've always giggled about these things. It's a way to bring it out, to talk about things. I don't think the intent of the show was ever to be hateful towards anyone. The landlords came off like the joke, not Jack Tripper. And Mrs. Roper was in on the joke. She was in on the fun. And I think she was the bridge between the older generation and the younger generation, who just said, look, live and let live, and let's go party.
Right.
My neighbor, who was around the same age, I think he asked me what my favorite TV show was, and I said Three's Company. And he was shocked. He was like, "Your parents let you watch that?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I was like, "What's the big deal?" Because again, it was just all very innocent to me. But I guess to other people, it was
right.
It was perception of it.
And it wasn't deemed appropriate for kids, right?
Right.
Even in more recent years, there's still some people that just feel like, no. Fortunately, my mom let me watch. She knew it was going over my head, and I was watching it for that scene where Jack Tripper fell off the couch, or Jack, Janet, and Terry were in the kitchen thinking that, Terry's boyfriend was trying to poison her salad and acting like a bunch of, dinglings. And she knew that was cool, and it gave me an outlet that I really needed as a kid to laugh. So to just have a blanket thing, if you shouldn't watch this thing, of these people having fun, that's kind of sad that people, younger people were shielded from that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the show, the show aired when there was no social media. There wasn't a thing. Everybody knowing every single controversy behind the scenes, things like that. My question is, when Jenna Lee Harrison joined the show, was there what did the audience do in those times? I mean, did they know this was coming?
That's a great question. Well, I think because it was such a story initially in the trades, because of Suzanne's absences and the war of words that started between Alan Hamill, her husband and manager, and Mickey Ross, especially the chief creative producer at that time. And, Suzanne knew how to work the media, and they were all over the place. Good Morning America, Donahue, nighttime interviews, if they could get them, print media. Everyone read, People and TV Guide back then. People knew that something was going on. Where's Chrissy? What's going on? Why is she phoning it in? But I'm sure that there was a lot of well, why is there's another blonde? What's this?
This was a huge story for its time. And can you
really
imagine if Twitter were around back then with all the comments and and speculation
gosh.
and people arguing back then.
And taking, one bit of information or misinformation and spinning it into a whole thread or conspiracy.
In your book, and I've heard this in other places too, I think what John Ritter was most annoyed about was not so much that Suzanne was asking for more money. I think it was more that he was being she was being disruptive to the show, because they were scripting out things and she wouldn't show up to rehearsals, and then they eventually had to give all her lines to Don Knotts. So I think that's where his anger towards Suzanne kind of came from. Am I right with that?
I think so. Absolutely. I think that the one line from him, and I mean, maybe paraphrasing this from the book, where he says, "We all go to renegotiate. Can I have more money? No. Okay, you go back to work." And he said, but with Suzanne, it's like, "Can I have more money? No. Well, F you.
Right.
I'm going to get more money because I am Three's Company." And what I find fascinating is, as many times as people go back to the book to take stories for these online websites, like, why Joyce DeWitt always wore pantyhose on Three's Company. Like, suddenly she just started talking about that in 2022. And they like won't reference the book, which I always find kind of funny. And no one has like called that one line from John. It sort of says it all. It was like, no, okay. But with Suzanne, it was, I am Three's Company. And it was those missed tapings or rehearsals that really, really did it. And he said, I was the last one to hold on. But now you lost me too. In a letter that he wrote to her. So when Suzanne would go out and do an interview in more recent years saying, I was fired for asking for a raise, she said, it's very much like my whole story with Three's Company. I was coming from my truth and they were coming from theirs. I thought that was so fascinating. If you really look at it, maybe in essence, she was fired for asking for a raise, because there were people who told me, co-producers, that they thought that because of Alan Hamill, when he came in to make demands, they saw it as a chance to get rid of her. And it wasn't equal money with John Ritter, because he was making $50,000, not $150,000, that has been misquoted since like 2017 or so, 2015, when one of the trades did a story and said he was making that. So that's bizarre that people like can't go back and research like numbers from before 2017. And it was those absences that soured John Ritter. It was not going to be repaired, irreparable. It could not be repaired, especially after she declined his invitation to meet with her privately, with no agents, managers, and she just declined.
It is a testament to good representation, because, when you have a bad middleman, that just makes everything so much worse, just like pouring gasoline on a fire.
It does. And especially if you do have male producers who, are sexist and who don't value the female contribution as much as they do the male contribution. But by the same token, this was a show starring John Ritter first, and then Joyce DeWitt, and then Suzanne Somers. And like Suzanne's original manager, Jay Bernstein, had told me, he would have always kept that show because that's how Suzanne got everything else. But then you also look at, okay, her husband's now representing her. Her husband knows her value, and how could he not take it personally? And so it became this thing between Mickey Ross and Alan Hamill that really took it to, crazy heights.
To Suzanne's credit, I think she did feel regret about how things were handled. And I think she does realize the mistakes that her and Alan made during that whole process. And, she did feel bad, because I think she genuinely loved the show and loved, the people she was working with. It's just, it was a different time, and there was egos up the wazoo, and it was just, it was a lot of stuff going on. But, I'm happy to hear that later on in years, she, they kind of regretted how it all went down instead of holding animosity towards each other.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. And when I was watching Suzanne as she bounced back and battled back and made this huge comeback, and like I said, 91 with Step by Step, which was a success, and it ran like 7 seasons. The same year she had the TV movie of Keeping Secrets, and that really gave her some depth and gave people an idea of what she had overcome in her young life. And she came back as this adult, that people had admiration for and could look past what happened 10 years prior if they had a bad taste in their mouth about that. And then she had the Thigh Master, which made her
huge. Yes,
huge.
That's Three's Company came second. For me, it was the Thigh Master. That was my introduction to Suzanne Somers. Let me tell you. And it was always in somebody's corner of their house. Any friends you went over, it was always a thigh. No one was ever using it, but there was a Thigh Master laying around
in people's car, like a spare tire.
Oh, right. We kept ours next to our low jack. And you didn't want to mix those two things up. Let me tell you, it's painful. The Thigh Master, she was so brilliant because she knew that this would generate buzz, right? And the innuendo, that look on her face when she was using it in that original ad, and people had a field day with it. I remember I was like 19. I was spending the summer with family in Los Angeles, and I was interning for a senator there. This gal that worked in the senator's office walked in and she said, "Did you all see that new ad with Suzanne Somers with that thing between her legs?" She said, "Oh my God, I can't believe they allowed that on TV." And that's when I knew. And I knew she was back, right? But when I interviewed her in 97, in essence, she said, "I wish it had ended differently." But she said, "I still don't think I did anything wrong." And I think she felt so committed to the cause of what she was trying to do that maybe she still wasn't quite ready to look at the effect that it had on some of the people she worked with. So that was tough. That was tough to weave her story in with everyone else's. It was my hope and prayer to bring these 3 people back together, and it never quite happened. She and John had a couple of interactions. They tried to get Suzanne to do a couple of appearances with John and Joyce in his sitcom, and then another Fox special that was being pitched in 2002. And she always said no. And I think she had regrets about that when John passed a year later. But it to this day, there are some really strong differences of opinion or different views of what is fact and what wasn't about what went down during some of those controversies, including the Newsweek cover in 78. But I was really happy for her that she made such an amazing comeback. And I even interviewed her a few times for different health and wellness books she had out over the last several years. And, she went out on her own terms, I think. She was her own boss and her own person. It just still stuns me that she didn't battle back against that cancer, that it did lead to her passing, because you just thought this woman's going to be around forever, right?
Yeah. Where were you when you found out about Suzanne's passing, and was it a shock to you?
It was, but it kind of wasn't a surprise. I woke up one morning and funny enough, this is really weird. I found out about her passing. I got a text from one of Bob Barker's models from The Price is Right. Now, this is bizarre, right?
That's how Rob and I found out, too.
Which Barker's beauty told you?
Yeah. The brunette one.
Diane Parkinson.
Right. And I had just gotten a text from her, Holly, from The Price is Right, because I've been working on a Price is Right project for a long time. And that's coming up in a year or two. But I'd gotten a text from her maybe 6 weeks prior or so that Bob Barker had died. And everyone was sort of like, okay, well, he almost made it to 100, but it was sort of like the Betty White thing. He was 99.
Right.
So that wasn't such a shock. And I wake up and she said, "Did you hear that Suzanne Somers passed away?" And it just broke my heart. And I had noticed on some of her Instagram or Facebook live shows, people would say, "You need to really look at this. Suzanne isn't looking very well." And I would tune in for a minute or two, and people were like, "Oh, she just doesn't look like herself." And a couple people were like, made some real snarky comments like, "Is that a wig?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, if she's got some illness," people, and talk about the social media age, it made me sick to my stomach. And it was, we knew that she had fallen downstairs in her home and broken her neck, but she had kind of recovered from that. And then they had disclosed that she had had another fall and that she had something called hydrocephalus, sort of water on the brain from that, which was causing some cognitive issues. But they hadn't really released that the breast cancer had come back, which I think they knew about in early 2023. And so they finally disclosed it, I think, in July of last year. And then in October, she was gone because it had become metastatic and spread to her brain. And it just broke my heart because I thought, my God, this woman went through so much the last 3 or so years of her life. And maybe they thought her change in cognition, et cetera, was all due to the fall. And they finally went in and found out that the cancer had come back and was spreading. And, maybe it was too late. I don't know. But it just broke my heart for her son and her husband and the rest of their family. And it broke my heart too, because I immediately went back to those times that I met her when I was a teenager and how warm she was and kind. And then I would read those same things from her step-by-step kids, and Patrick Duffy. And that's what I was feeling.
Another piece of our childhood is gone because we all grew up with her.
Yeah, all grew up with her and just really expected her. She would say, "I'm going to make it to 100." And, if that lady said something and she set her mind to it, she pretty much usually accomplished it. She told me for the book, "I will play Chrissy again." Well, she tried with some concepts to come back as Chrissy. I don't think that the production company ever really cooperated with that because they owned the character. But ultimately, she did a little thing on Dancing with the Stars where she was Chrissy. And maybe that was what it was supposed to be. And that was sort of a part of her closure on that, perhaps. But it really surprised me that this happened, and it was shocking. So yeah, it was a real loss. And after losing John Ritter almost 20 years to the date prior, 20 years and 1 month or so to Suzanne's passing, we had just kind of got through that anniversary, and then that happened. You just really feel like, and we lost so many people during COVID, and you just start to just kind of feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with this world? Are we ever going to have any of our people that are going to be robust and okay?
Can you imagine if all three of them reunited on, say, this past year's Emmys when they were doing all those reunion with the cast members of different sitcoms? How great would it have been to see the three of them come out for something like that? And
that would have been so incredible. You had some casts like the Mary Tyler Moore Show where so many of them lived to be like 90 or 90 plus. And then you had Three's Company where one went way too soon. The other pretty much went unexpectedly at an age where people live well beyond 76, 77. That still felt premature for her. And now those opportunities are no longer there and haven't been for a long time. And but it would have been so wonderful. It would have been great to see it in 2002. But, we just don't have those crystal balls to see that, hey, jump on this now. And I wish it had happened, though. It would have been cool.
And Rob and I were in college when John Ritter passed away, and we were really so bummed out. It's still to this day the only celebrity death I think I cried over. But what What a shock that was.
I was woken up like at 5 a.m. from a reporter at Inside Edition who had kept my number a few years after they did a piece on the book. And she'd come to one of the book signings and got some coverage. So she was a real cool gal. And but she called me up and she said, Chris, did you hear about John Ritter? And when you get that call,
Right.
It's not good, right? And you go, what? And she said he got sick on the set of 8 Simple Rules and collapsed and later died last night. And the world stopped spinning at that point because I considered him a friend, and even John Ritter was the kind of person that even if you never met him, you kind of felt like he was a friend,
Oh yeah, definitely.
He or kind of a brotherly type of friend. And it just devastated me. And I couldn't really come up with words to share with her. And I stayed home that day and I called in sick and I couldn't go to work. And it was really, really rough. And I talk about feeling so bad for his young children and his first wife and his second wife and his brother who he had helped so much. And this was a guy that just felt like I said, sort of everyone's friend or brother. And it was a shocker, that's for sure.
Yeah, the irony and the coincidental weirdness was that when I heard this, my roommate and I in college would watch all the time the movie Stay Tuned, starring John Ritter. And like we just got a kick out of that movie, and we would just always play it in the dorm room, and then just
That's
one
so
day,
cool.
it was like so he was definitely in our little zeitgeist in college, and
Yes,
it was just a shocker.
that's so cool.
Just a shocker.
Ironically enough, I remember the morning of turning on the TV and Suzanne Somers was on some morning show talking about, he was such a great friend. I loved working with him on Three's Company. And I immediately thought, oh shit, Don Knotts died. But
Right.
lo and behold, it was John Ritter. And I was just flabbergasted when I heard that. I was like, no fucking way. I was just like, so upset and so hurt, and still I'm still in disbelief of how young he died and the way he died, and it sucks. It really does suck.
So tragic. I mean, here he was, and hurt is the word, hurt. It really did hurt, and it hurt a lot of people for a long time. This guy was 54. And was having one of his big comebacks, and had a young child, and had finally received acclaim for his dramatic work and projects like Sling Blade. He had been on Broadway. I met him after his Broadway show, The Dinner Party, in 2002. Which I went there a week or two after he held up the book on the early show, and he said, "Did you see me with the book?" And I said, "Oh my God, thank you." and I went backstage with him, and he was just so accessible to me as a writer, but as a personality, you felt like you knew him. You felt like he wasn't. There wasn't two different people, like the celebrity and then the man. It really felt like the same person. The last time I saw him was at 8 Simple Rules in April of 2003, and he was so kind. And he didn't need to do this kind of thing, but this shows you who he was. At the end of the show, when they did the curtain call, and he was the last cast member announced, and John Ritter. And then he looked up in the crowd and he said, "And Chris Mann." Of course, no one there knew who I was, right? But that was for me. That was for me and my little group. And it just made my day. And that was the last memory that I had. And you just go, how cruel that someone this loving and this wonderful was robbed of their life so soon.
Can you imagine him in one of these streaming dark comedy shows like Barry, like Henry Winkler and Barry. Like I could still picture him in one of those shows now if he had lived and just totally knocking it out of the park, because he was that great of an actor, and he totally would have taken advantage of all the good things that all these streaming shows offer now.
Oh God, the richness of character. He would have a career like Henry Winkler and Steve Martin. You know, he would be doing all those types of things. So we were robbed. We were his family, certainly, but all of us were robbed of all those performances that he would have given us, the fun stuff and the dark, brooding, multi-layered stuff that he could bring as a dramatic actor.
Yeah, I remember seeing it was a made-for-TV movie, but he totally played against type. I do not remember the title of it, but he played this abusive husband in this made-for-TV movie. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Unforgivable?
Yes.
Not to be confused with Unforgiven, but I think it was Unforgivable.
Yes, that is the one. Yep.
Yes, where he was a spouse abuser.
And he was terrifying.
And he was terrifying. And I remember when I interviewed him for the book, he said, you know, I don't mind Jack Tripper being one of the things I'm remembered for, but I want to be remembered as a father and someone who gave to charity. And and a guy who did other works. And he mentioned that one, and Sling Blade, and a couple of other really unusual roles that he had in the mid 90s. When you see people come full circle in their life, and he came full circle back to really, you know, his dramatic roots, yet he was still doing comedy. And you see them, oh gosh, now they're in their renaissance. Then they've got 20 or 30 years now to go. Now I kind of go, okay, God, is this a sign that their work here is done?
Right.
If so, take away those roles, make him do a bad sitcom for 15 years, and then give us a second renaissance. But he and Suzanne both accomplished so much in their respective fields.
It's just sad because, as you said, they're a lot of them are all gone now from that show. And you have Jenny Lee, and you have Richard, and you have Priscilla and Joyce. So I hope that they acknowledge the precious time that they have, and all the good memories that they had with the rest of the cast that is no longer here. And just forget about all the turmoil and bullshit that came with that sitcom.
I hope so too. I really, really do. I talked a bit with Joyce after Suzanne passed, and not to, not really disclose too much about that, but she did say, "Well, somebody called me the other day the sole survivor." I said, "You're the Betty White of Three's Company."
Right.
I said, "So you gotta go to 99 at least, Joyce." And she laughed, but there is that sense of, oh my gosh, there's only a few of us left. And it didn't seem like it was supposed to be this way 20 some years ago. We thought they'd be doing Three's Company in their 80s. So I think it's been a reality check for all of us, really, honestly.
What else are you working on currently?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I have been working for some time on a Price is Right behind the scenes book. And
nice.
So that's talk about drama, right?
I know, right? I'm sure there's some tidbits in there as well.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And then Bob Barker sadly passing. He had a complicated legacy too, no doubt. So that is probably going to be coming late next year or early 2026. I'm also looking into doing, a podcast myself in the coming months or so. Join the club, right? Yeah, exactly. You guys do such a great podcast, and it's been so fun to talk to you. It's a great format, and I love that you guys have such a love for pop culture and pay tribute to these actors that we all know and love. And thank you for letting me be a part of your Suzanne tribute.
Before we go, Chris, we have to ask you, All-time favorite episode of Three's Company. Go.
Yes.
Oh, go. Well, can I say two? Can I say two?
Sure.
Because
it could be multiple episodes if you can't decide.
a lot of people agree on Up in the Air from season 6.
Yes.
The John Ritter masterclass of comedy, right?
Absolutely.
That was his Lucy in the Chocolate Factory /
Right.
Edmund / Stomping Grapes all together. And it was so brilliant. And what more can be said? The man was a master of physical comedy. And that from that scene, and I asked him this when I was, however old I was, 19, when I first interviewed him. And I said, well, John, what's your favorite episode? And he said, well, you just tell me yours first. And I said, well, the one where you go to the island and you drink the rocket. And he said, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because that's my favorite too. And I said, from that moment when you grab that old woman and say, strut with me, mama, I said, it's pure gold. So when I need a pick me up, I go to strut with me, mama.
That's great.
That right there, man, is just, it brings a smile to my face and laughter to my spirit every time I think about it. So you have that. And then again, this goes back to the two schools of thought. First, original cast versus later years. I love them all. Chrissy eating a pie is one of my top 5, no doubt. The Bake Off. Jack and Chrissy handcuffed. Then my second all-time favorite episode is Jack's tattoo from season 8, where they think he's getting a vasectomy. Janet does, because he's going in to get rid of something he should have had in the first place. And Mr. Furley thinks he's getting a sex change. So there's multiple layers of misunderstanding. And Terry's in on the info because she knows he got a tattoo on his butt from his Navy buddies, and they put a tattoo on it called the Love Butt. So he's ashamed and he's embarrassed. And of course, Janet thinks it has something to do with a vasectomy, because that's Janet, right? And Mr. Furley oversees Jack with one of the girls' luggage, and out falls some lingerie, and he thinks Jack's having a sex change. So there's this great hospital scene, again, where Jack Cooper gets doped up on medicine. And Janet's trying to change his clothes and get him out of that hospital so he doesn't have that vasectomy. And she's falling over herself, and he's looking at her butt saying, I'll always remember you, Janet. And this was one of the last full-on farces that they did after the news of the ending of the show had come, which shows you how amazing Joyce was as a professional, because she was heartbroken, yet she was doing some of her very best work, especially with John. And then they open the door and Jack Tripper moons the Terry and Janet, and Mr. Furley walks in and faints. It's just beautiful, it's beautiful stuff. And so that's number 2.
Do you think, last question, do you think that Jack should have ended up with Janet at the end of the Three's Company instead of doing the spinoff?
Yes, I do. Certainly, if they were going to change the concept, in my opinion, it should have been Janet, and they should have had the other cast come in, like they did with Frasier. They would bring back some of the other cast to make people feel familiar with that original world that Frasier came from, until the show stood on its own. And I don't think that the casting was right. And I think it could have gone on for a few more years. But, there are no yes or no answers for me. I have to give you the background. So there you have it.
Yeah. No, that I appreciate that. But yeah, I agree 100% that it should have been Jack and Janet at the end. And,
do you?
I feel like they just kind of tacked on the Vicky character at the end just so they could get the spinoff going. But that's a whole other episode, Chris.
Right. Exactly. But we covered all the main points, and I appreciate your time, you guys. I don't talk a lot about Three's Company anymore, because every time I get around the subject, something sad happens. But this has been a real celebration and a thoughtful conversation. And again, I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you, Chris. And the three of us are going to meet at the next Mrs. Roper bar crawl in Oklahoma.
Right?
Our hometown. We'll all be
Right?
there.
Yes.
And I'm actually wearing my Regal Beagle shirt today.
And I'm using my Thigh Master while we talk. So.
Perfect.
So there you have it. And Rico and the Man. Great title, by the way. Thank you, Rico and the Man.
Thanks for listening to Rico and the Man. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Rico and the Man and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you love the show, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you hate the show, fuck you.
For more Rico and the Man action, go to ricoandtheman.com.